challenge you to find a strawberry that tastes anywhere near as good as one you've grown yourself. In fact, I'll let you into a little secret. You can't. Containers make this even easier because you can grow strawberries just about anywhere, on patios, balconies, or even doorsteps. If you want perfect strawberries from pots every single time, you've come to the right place. Container selection. Here's something most people get wrong right from the start. Strawberries have surprisingly shallow root systems. Their roots clump together and don't dive deep like tomatoes or peppers. That means you could technically plant them in that tall fabric grow bags, but you'd be wasting half the soil because the roots will never reach down that far. Not the end of the world, just not efficient. Most successful container growers opt for something shallower. Think wide and shallow rather than tall and narrow. You've probably seen those classic stacking planters that create what people call a strawberry tower. They work pretty well and give you that cascading effect which looks beautiful when the plants start producing runners. You could also use a basic wide pot, something about 6 to 8 inches deep. That's the sweet spot. Anything shallower and you're pushing it, the roots need at least that much room to establish themselves properly. Now let me warn you about those strawberry planters with the little side pockets. I've tried them and honestly, I'm not a fan. When you water from the top, the potting mix just gets blasted right out of those pockets. The plants end up rocking around, drying out faster, and struggling to stay anchored. If you really want one of these, look for versions with cupped planting pockets that actually hold the soil in place. Material matters more than you'd think. Terracotta looks gorgeous, no question about it, but in hot summers, you'll be watering once or twice a day because terracotta is so porous. Plastic containers hold moisture much better, which is exactly what strawberries need. They hate drying out completely, but they also can't stand sitting in soggy soil. It's a delicate balance, and plastic helps you maintain it without constant monitoring. For milder climates, unglazed clay pots strike a nice middle ground, wicking just enough moisture without extreme drying. Avoid metal containers. They heat up too fast in the sun, cooking the roots. Whatever container you choose, and this is absolutely critical, make sure it has plenty of drainage holes at the bottom. I'm talking multiple holes, not just one sad little opening. Strawberries are incredibly susceptible to root rot when water pools at the bottom. Punch extra holes if you need to. Seriously, this one detail can make or break your entire harvest. For towers or stacked designs, ensure each tier drains independently to prevent soggy lower levels. Wide, shallow trays or half barrels also shine for maximum plant count in minimal depth. Soil mix matters. You might think you need some fancy specialized soil for strawberries, but here's the truth. I actually prefer cheap potting mix for container strawberries. Sounds backwards, right? But inexpensive potting mix is mostly wood chips and woody material, which means it drains really well. That's exactly what we want. The trick is adding something to help it hold moisture without creating a swampy mess. That's where vermiculite comes in. Mix some extra vermiculite into your cheap potting mix, and you've got yourself the perfect balance. Vermiculite holds onto water beautifully but doesn't create that waterlogged feeling that leads to root rot. It's like giving your soil a sponge that knows when to squeeze and when to hold on. If you want to go the DIY route, here's a formula that works great. Take 2 parts sphagnum peat moss, 1 part perlite, and throw in a couple scoops of vermiculite. This mix will hold moisture where you need it, while still allowing excess water to drain away. Fair warning though, perlite and peat moss prices are absolutely out of control right now. That's another reason I usually stick with the cheap potting mix plus vermiculite approach. Same results, fraction of the cost. Here's a mistake I see constantly. People fill their containers with bone-dry potting mix, plant their strawberries, then try to water everything in. The dry soil just repels the water, and it runs right through without actually moistening anything. Always pre-moisten your potting mix before filling your containers. Add water gradually, mixing it in with your hands until the soil feels like a wrung-out sponge. Not dripping wet, just evenly damp throughout. And please never use garden soil in containers. I know it's tempting because it's free and right there in your yard, but garden soil compacts terribly in pots. It becomes dense and heavy, choking out the air spaces that roots need to breathe. Even if your garden soil is beautiful and fluffy in the ground, it will turn into concrete in a container. Stick with actual potting mix designed for container growing. Your strawberries will thank you with much bigger harvests. Planting technique. There's one planting mistake that kills more container strawberries than anything else, and I'm going to make sure you avoid it. But first, let's talk about what you're actually planting. Strawberries usually come in two forms: bare root or potted plants. Bare roots look absolutely dead when you first see them. Just brown, scraggly things with no leaves and sad-looking roots. Don't let that fool you. They're just dormant, and they'll explode with growth once planted. If you've got bare roots, soak them in a bowl of water for 4 to 6 hours before planting. Keep the bowl somewhere cool and dark while they're soaking. This hydrates the roots and wakes them up from dormancy. Right before you're ready to plant, separate each plant from the bunch and get ready to tuck them into your container. Now here's that critical mistake I mentioned. See that thick band between the roots and where the leaves emerge? That's called the crown. The crown positioning makes or breaks your plant's survival. Plant it too deep and the whole thing will rot away. Plant it too shallow and it'll wave around in the wind, dry out instantly, and create a weak, brittle plant that never really establishes itself. You want to plant so the crown sits ever so slightly proud of the soil surface. Imagine the crown is just barely peeking above the soil line. That's the sweet spot. For potted plants, it's easy because you just match the depth they were at in their nursery pot. For bare roots, make a nice wide hole with your finger, spread those roots out gently, then backfill with soil until you reach that perfect crown height. Spacing matters too, especially in containers. In the ground, strawberries need about 18 inches between plants, but in containers, you can cheat a little. Space them every 6 inches or so, and they'll do just fine. Just don't go crazy and cram too many in there. 3 to 4 plants per square foot is your maximum. Any more than that, and they'll compete for resources instead of making you strawberries. After planting, firm the soil around each plant gently but deliberately. You're trying to eliminate air pockets that could dry out the roots. Think of it like tucking them into bed. Snug, but not suffocating. Strategic fertilizing. If you Google whether strawberries are heavy feeders, you'll get completely opposite answers. One article says they're hungry plants, the next says they barely need anything. So I turned to actual research from university agriculture departments, and here's what they found. Strawberries benefit hugely from pre-plant fertilization, which just means mixing fertilizer into your soil before you put the plants in. I use a basic organic fertilizer, like a Spoma Garden Tone. Nothing fancy, just a balanced low nitrogen vegetable fertilizer. For a container that'll hold about 3 strawberry plants, I mix in roughly 1/3 cup right into the potting mix before planting. That gives the roots immediate access to nutrients as soon as they start growing. If you want an extra boost, toss some bone meal into each planting hole. It's rich in phosphorus, which helps with root development and flower production. Here's where it gets interesting though. If you're growing ever-bearing varieties, which produce fruit multiple times throughout the season, they're going to need additional feeding. Those plants are working hard cranking out flowers and berries for months on end. They'll run out of gas without a little help from you. Every 6 to 8 weeks during the growing season, side dress your plants with more fertilizer. Side dressing just means sprinkling fertilizer around the base of the plant and working it lightly into the top layer of soil. Now you might see berry-specific fertilizers at the garden center, promising amazing results. Honestly, save your money. Those formulas have a bit more sulfur to acidify the soil, which is great for blueberries, but strawberries aren't that picky. They like moderately acidic soil, and your regular potting mix is already close enough to that. The standard balanced fertilizer will do everything you need without the premium price tag. Here's something most people don't know. After your strawberries finish producing fruit, they don't just coast through the rest of summer. They're actually busy forming the buds inside their crowns that will become next spring's flowers and fruit. Fertilizing in August, right after harvest, gives those buds the nutrients they need to develop properly. Apply about 1/3 ounce per square foot. That late-season feeding translates directly into bigger harvest the following year. Drop a comment and tell me if you're team prune the runners or team let them grow wild. I'm curious what works for everyone else. Watering without drowning. Strawberries remind me of raspberries in one frustrating way. Let them dry out completely and they'll die on you fast. but leave them sitting in soggy soil, and root rot will take them down even faster. It's like they want you to pay attention without being needy about it. The challenge with containers is they naturally dry out much quicker than ground soil, so you're constantly walking that tightrope. Here's the technique that works. Water more often, but with less water each time. Instead of one big drenching that leaves the soil waterlogged, give your plants smaller drinks several times a day during hot weather. The goal is keeping the soil just damp, never bone dry but never soggy either. Stick your finger into the soil about an inch deep. If it feels dry at that depth, time to water. If it still feels moist, wait. Container material affects how quickly things dry out. Remember those terracotta pots I mentioned earlier? In scorching summer heat, you'd literally need to water them twice a day because terracotta is so moisture permeable. Plastic containers hold water longer, giving you a bit more breathing room. But even with plastic, check your plants daily when temperatures climb. Containers sitting in full sun can heat up fast, and warm soil dries out exponentially faster than cool soil. Here's a trick to help. When you water the plants themselves, lightly spray the outside of the containers too. As that water evaporates, it pulls heat away from the pot and cools the soil inside. You can also wrap containers in aluminum foil or reflective material to bounce heat away. Sounds weird, but it genuinely helps keep root temperatures down. Always aim your water at the base of the plant, right at the soil level. Avoid wetting the leaves and especially avoid getting water on the developing fruit. Wet leaves can develop fungal spots and wet berries often develop mold. Direct that stream right where it needs to go, at the roots. One last tip that makes a massive difference. Add a layer of mulch on top of your soil. I use wood chips, but you could use straw or even shredded leaves. That mulch layer acts like a blanket, keeping moisture from evaporating too quickly. It's especially helpful in those small containers that want to dry out every 5 minutes. Sunlight and placement. Strawberries are sun worshippers. They want at least 6 hours of direct sunlight daily, but honestly, 8 to 10 hours is where they really thrive. More sun means sweeter berries with better flavor. It's not just about getting fruit, it's about getting fruit that actually tastes incredible. If you're wondering why your berries are bland, lack of sun is probably your culprit. The beauty of containers is you can move them around to chase the sun. Start them in spring in your sunniest spot. Watch how the sun moves across your space throughout the day, and position your containers where they'll soak up maximum light. Just remember, what's sunny in April might be shaded by a tree canopy in July. Be ready to relocate if needed. But here's where it gets tricky if you live somewhere with brutal summers. Once temperatures regularly hit the 90s or above, strawberries appreciate some afternoon shade. That intense late-day heat can actually stress the plants and slow down fruit production. If you're growing a variety like Fort Laramie that's particularly sensitive to heat, definitely move your containers to a spot with filtered afternoon light during the hottest months. Container growing creates another heat problem that ground-planted strawberries never face. Those roots are sitting in above-ground pots that heat up way beyond soil temperature. Dark-coloured containers are the worst offenders. They absorb heat all day and basically bake the roots inside. The plants might look fine from above, but their roots are struggling below the surface. Combat this by shading the containers themselves, not just the plants. Set them on a covered porch where the pots stay cool even if the plant leaves get full sun. Or group several containers together so they shade each other. That aluminum foil trick I mentioned earlier works great here too. Wrap it around the outside of your pots to reflect heat away. Think about seasonal placement too. In early spring, when you're hoping for flowers, full sun all day is perfect. Midsummer, a little afternoon shade helps. Come fall, when temperatures moderate, back to full sun to squeeze out those last fruits before frost. Containers give you the flexibility to optimize conditions throughout the entire growing season. Use that advantage. Managing runners. Around midsummer, your strawberry plants will start sending out these thin, wiry stems that reach out in all directions. Those are called runners, and each one has a baby plant forming at its tip. It's the strawberry's way of reproducing itself, kind of like how spider plants make babies. Left alone, those runners will root wherever they touch soil, and you'll end up with a whole colony of strawberry plants. Sounds great, right? Well, not always. Here's the thing about runners. Every single one saps energy away from fruit production. The mother plant is pouring resources into creating and feeding those baby plants instead of making new strawberries. If you want maximum fruit yield, especially in containers where space is limited, snip those runners off as soon as you spot them. Just use clean scissors and cut them right at the base. The plant will redirect all that energy back into bulking up and producing bigger, better berries. That said, runners aren't useless. They're actually an incredibly easy way to multiply your strawberry collection. There's this technique I love called the Medusa method. Hang your strawberry container up high, like on a plant hanger or elevated shelf. As runners grow and babies form, they'll dangle down without ever touching soil. The mother plant keeps producing more and more runners, stretching longer and longer trying to reach ground. You can get 15 new plants from one mother plant this way. Once you've got a bunch of dangling babies, set small pots of soil underneath each one. Pin the baby plant down so it makes contact with the soil, leaves facing up. The runner stays connected to the mother while the baby develops its own root system. After a few weeks, the runner will turn yellow and crispy. That's your signal to cut it free. Congratulations, you've just propagated a whole new strawberry plant. First-year plants should never be allowed to produce runners. I know it's tempting to let them multiply right away, but trust me on this. That first season is all about establishment. Make your plant focus entirely on developing strong roots and building itself up. Pinch off every single runner that appears. Come year 2, that patient plant will reward you with incredible production. Then, if it starts throwing runners, you can decide whether to remove them for fruit or use them for propagation. Common mistakes. Let's talk about what not to do, because I've seen these mistakes tank perfectly good strawberry containers. The biggest one is overcrowding. Those plants look tiny when you first put them in, and it's so tempting to squeeze in just one more. Don't do it. Strawberries need space to spread out. More than 3 or 4 plants per square foot, and they'll compete viciously for water, nutrients and light. You'll end up with lots of green leaves but barely any fruit. Fewer plants properly spaced will always outproduce a cramped container. Root rot sneaks up on people who think they're being good plant parents by watering frequently. If your container doesn't have enough drainage holes, or if the holes get blocked by soil, water accumulates at the bottom. The roots sit in that stagnant water and fungal diseases move in fast. By the time you notice the leaves looking sad, the roots are already compromised. Drainage is not optional. Check those holes regularly and make sure water flows through freely every single time you water. We covered crown depth earlier, but it bears repeating because it's such a common killer. Burying that crown even half an inch too deep invites rot. The crown is where all new growth emerges, and it needs exposure to air and light. At the same time, exposed roots dry out and weaken the plant. Find that sweet spot where roots are covered but the crown sits right at the surface. Here's a mistake that won't show up until next year. After your plants finish fruiting, it's easy to forget about them. They're not giving you berries anymore, so why bother, right? Wrong. Those plants are actively forming next year's flower buds throughout late summer and fall. Neglect them now and you're sabotaging next spring's harvest before it even starts. Keep watering, keep the area tidy, and feed them that late season fertilizer. Winter protection gets overlooked too. Sure, strawberries are cold hardy perennials, but their roots are sitting in above ground containers that freeze solid way faster than ground soil. If temperatures drop into the low 20s for extended periods, wrap those containers in burlap or move them into an unheated garage. And birds will absolutely steal your almost ripe berries. Cover ripening fruit with netting or organza bags before those robins discover your crop. Container strawberries can produce just as much fruit as ground-planted ones when you pay attention to these details. It's not complicated, just a matter of understanding what these plants actually need and avoiding the common pitfalls. Now get out there and grow some incredible strawberries. If you loved this video, you'll love the next one even more.
If you found value in this video, you're going to love this next one.